70 years ago, many of the values that face us in the media and elsewhere would have, amongst normal and apolitical people, been regarded as abhorrent. Now they are normative, and even to speak out against them is to essentially embrace thought criminality. But there's a degree to which the reason this has occurred is because a hybrid is developed between post-war secular liberalism and the Marxism of the past. Marxism believed, almost with post-religious ardour, as it shot religious people, that everything could be changed, everything could be reworked, that man himself could be reworked. One of their most fanatical postulates is hostility to all biological notions of man and all notions of prior inequality. The idea that in the end even human rights jargon will always disappoint, because there are always beautiful people and ugly people. There's always unintelligent people, as many of them, and there's always very intelligent people and always a range with it between. There's always people of great physical power and people who are weaklings. The problem with all Marxist theory is it's counter-propositional in relation to what we are, what all races are, what humanity is and all mankind is as a whole. We're based on nature. We have our being in that substructure. We are not as leftist ideas would have us. One of the reasons for the extraordinary rapacity of communist terror is, I think, a sense of disappointment on a cosmic level. When you get into power, you realise that human beings are partly avaricious, partly sexual, partly acquisitive, partly territorial, partly communal, partly group identifying, everything that your theory said that they weren't. And there's a strong element of concealed and not so concealed in the regime phase, misanthropy in communism, that if humanity can't be redeemed in that way, we'll fall on them anyway. It's almost a secularization of the idea of sin. They've disappointed us, and so they'll suffer. Man is nicer than he is when human nature is dualist. Human beings are kind and nasty. They're avaricious, but they have a capacity for self-sacrifice. They're endlessly cowardly and lying, but they also have a penchant for courage and glory. That's what we are. The great religions actually always known what we are. They shift utopianism and the desire we could be different from what we are to another world. But the leftist pseudo-religions of modernity have brought it down to this level and tried to counter-propositionally achieve it through violence and political struggle. Hard Marxism, stroke Marxist-Leninism and various anarchistic and other variants, often to one side of it, have failed. But the trajectory of the ideology itself has succeeded, has morphed, and has transfigured itself in a new way. The left has come into the centre, taken it, turned it around, and what we call liberalism now, either with a small or a large L, is not the liberalism of 50 to 60 years ago. It's not even the liberalism of 150 years ago. The Protestant ideological moralism that underpinned liberal ideas of a traditional sort has been ripped out. So it's become a materialist and secularist ideology prone to infiltration and change by forces from its own radical left. The reason we have the society that we have is due to large-scale economic and cultural forces, admittedly to a degree, but it's also due to the mindset that accepts them before they physically happen. Now, Marxism, in a sense, advocates two contradictory things, but it believes in contradiction held together in struggle. It believes everything's economically determined, and yet if you theorise about the way in which it's determined enough, you can actually change the nature of the determination. There was a theorist called Gramsci at the beginning of the 20th century, who, in the Italian Communist Party ranks, who split the idea of the superstructure, culture, society, the arts, intellect, media, from the base, economics. Then Marxism can go completely cultural and just swim around, not linked to proletarian movements, not linked to trade union politics, not linked to working class political struggle as defined by the far left. One point which is never dwelt upon, and there's an enormous amount of work on communism now, because it's so much in the past, people can sort of debate its details openly. The Jewish nature of communism, that is never ever discussed, and indeed is completely off limits in nearly all academic discourse. The truth is that nearly always half of the major core intellectuals in all communist groups are Jews or partly Jews, nearly all the half of the Central Committee, or the Executive Council, the Revolutionary Vanguard, or whatever it calls itself, is. The rest is made up of Bohemian, revolutionary Gentiles who are totally hate-filled and sparing and hostile to their own society. And it's a medley of these two groups, essentially. Outsider, insider groups to tear it down in the name of love, of course, in the name of love. But as you tear it down, you can catapult yourself from the fringe to the centre. This mixture of sentimentality, high theory, a Jewish desire for power, and extreme misanthropy, which will use, because it's secularised and has no objectivist moral basis, any means to bring itself in, has almost at times brought our entire culture and civilization to almost point of disaster. The one thing I would think, looking back on Marxism after 150 years in all of its variants, is the extraordinary cowardice of some of the most privileged people in Western societies who would not stand up to this type of theory, which is how it always begins, and didn't realise that in the end it would destroy everything they loved and everything they wanted, for flirting like an adult teenager with ideas of rebellion that are half disbelieved in as they put them, and not thinking that they will be used and used again and again and again to basically destroy nearly all of us. And it's because they haven't realised this that in a slightly softer version we're in the plight that we're in.